Good evening again, everyone. Thank you for a beautiful service and meditation tonight. Roger Shikan will be sharing with us some of his impressions from our reading of Entering the Mind of the Buddha. Thank you, Shikan.
Thank you, Jishin. Good to see you all here. Oh, I'm muted. Where is the... Okay. Good evening. Good to be here. Good to see you all here. So let's see. Tonight is Hardship. What is the title here? Something about hardship. Patience with harm or insult from sentient beings. And I just got back from a week vacation in the Bahamas with my two sons, and I had some opportunities to practice patience with difficult situations that arose. They were driving from their school, Wilmington, a 4.5-hour drive, and they were about half hour from home, and I had to call them up to get the passport information because we were going to the Bahamas the next morning, and suddenly my son says, "Oh God, damn, I brought the wrong passport. I brought my expired passport." So, and I was immediately patient and compassionate because he inherited his pretty extreme spaciness or absent-mindedness from me, which Gary can attest to. It reminded me of a time a few years ago. I was at a gas station and somehow I put on a new rental car where they put the emergency brake in these weird places, and I couldn't find it, and I had to call Gary, and he wasn't feeling well, but he was a bodhisattva and came and rescued me. And then there was that, and then a couple of days into the trip, Nikki again, he left his laptop outside on the hotel balcony, and it drowned that night, so we had to get him a new computer and all. But anyway, I was learning to be more patient with myself and patient with them, and we had a good trip, grand trip overall anyway. So, I'm learning to be more patient with my own absent-mindedness, but it doesn't get better with age. That's the thing, So it was interesting about this chapter where he tells the story of, I believe it's Kshanti Vadin and Hakuin. So I think, knowing Reb pretty well, he stayed at my house and I studied with him many, many years ago. I think maybe he told these or included these really pretty extreme stories in the chapter as a way of, reminding us of the possibility of our Buddha nature, the freedom from the confines of the physical body. And these two, bodhisattvas, I think of course, the story of Kshanti Vadin may have been true or may have been, kind of a myth handed down, but we know that, people have been that cruel, so it could be a true story. But anyway, I think that they receive the gift of fearlessness, and that opens the way for maybe otherworldly patience. Certainly, otherworldly patience would be the case in both of these stories. And I was kind of struck, when Reb said, "I've often wondered if someone was cutting me up, would I be patient with them?" And I'm kind of like, "Really, Reb? I mean, if it was me, I might have been feeling a lot of things, but I don't think patience would have been one of the first things I'd be wondering about." It's interesting that he said it that way, because he is one of those really kind of rock solid Buddhas. Although he won't call himself a Buddha, he's on the path still. but opening up those possibilities, that, and also that he mentioned that the story about Hakuin didn't mention that he didn't feel anything about all these false accusations. And I think that Hakuin really demonstrated fearlessness in himself, because if he hadn't, to not defend himself at all, I mean, who knows what could have happened. He could have been attacked, he could have been hung, he could have been arrested, tortured, and he just wasn't concerned about that at all. Apparently, he was revered enough that nobody really challenged him on it. I mean, they challenged him, but they didn't do anything about it. But that kind of fearlessness is at the heart of the great compassion of the Buddhas, that have that much faith in our true nature, in the nature that is inside us, not really totally inside us, but that's not located anywhere, that pervades the whole universe. We chant that in some of our chants, that Buddha nature pervades the whole universe. And so it absorbs all suffering. And it is great compassion. It's made of this great compassion. And another thing that we can learn through Reb's teaching of patience is, patience and compassion for ourselves, because in spite of the fact that we're not anywhere near, at least I'm not anywhere near the patience of Kshanti Vadin or Hakuin. But learning how to be patient with pain and suffering, is something that we learn pretty quickly when we take up Zen practice, or we sit our first session and we're pretty much in pain. If we're not used to sitting for long, long hours, we experience that, where we're taught to not grasp or turn away from our experience and just stay present to it. And we learn that we have a lot more resilience and capacity to accept things the way they are than we thought we did. So I was interested in what Reb said here on the bottom of page 59. He says, we may experience insult and disapproval physically in a particular part of our body. When we feel pain in a specific place in our body, we can learn to be present with that sensation. I find that the sensation of pain in my body is a being that is calling for a compassionate presence. When I give my compassionate presence to that being who is calling for it, there is healing and peace with the pain. We can do this with many different types of pain in different parts of our body. When we do, we are taking care of the pain-filled being in us who is calling for patience. So he mentioned about Hakuin that the story didn't say that he didn't feel anything. So Hakuin was very patient with his own feelings and with the feelings of others involved, the parents, the young girl who lied. And I think that that's one thing we can't really, learn to unconditionally welcome what's ever happening, which is, Reb has been teaching us in this book through the first few chapters, to learn to unconditionally welcome whatever experiences arise. Like his saying is, thank you very much. Whatever happens, thank you very much. I have no complaints whatsoever. That's a well-known saying of his. But we can't really do that. We can't really learn how to do that if we're afraid to fully feel our feelings, if we're afraid to fully feel the situation we're in. What helps me, what's helped me over the years at times, is to maybe use a little more descriptive or detailed exploration of what sensations really are, to be present with them. One is there really any entity to a sensation? What is the actual own being of a sensation? We know from our own experience that they arise within our awareness. So that we experience them inside, or we experience them that they arise within what we are. Not necessarily within the body, although most of the time we experience them in the body, but within our awareness. So and if we experience, painful sensations, we're experiencing what they're made of. So what are they made of? We can try to label them, but they're made of our awareness, whatever that is. They're part of us, right? And do they have a size? What is the size of a sensation? Does it have any edges? They can be very intense and have some density to them. But if we really pay close attention, we'll notice that they're always changing. There's different intensities to it. There's different textures. There's different, they can be soft or hard, pinprick or dull or searing, burning. There's all different types. And they're always moving, and they're impermanent, and they always arise and they pass away. But there's a presence here which we learn through our zazen, through our courage to face and stay present to them. There's a presence that's allowing them and welcoming them. And I noticed that when I was on the beach, I was thinking how Reb subtitled this chapter as Radiant Presence. So there's a kind of radiant presence that's always patient with us, with all of our experience. And as we learn to open to that radiant presence as our true identity, we're receiving the great compassion of the Buddha. And I think the next subchapter is about intimacy, but it's the expression of the most intimate experience we have is our true nature, that radiant presence of our true nature. Because it's so close, it's so close we can't separate ourselves from it. It's closer than close. I have a friend who's, his email is, he's in another group, he's a Zen student. His email is distanttom@gmail or whatever. Distant Tom is his email, and I thought, I said, have you ever thought of changing it to Closer Than Close, Tom? How would that work? Maybe maybe that would help your intimate life with your practice. But hardship from sentient beings is difficult. And I think part of the reason it's difficult is because we sense our shared being and the suffering that arises from our covering up, or it tends to the reality of our shared being, which I think is great compassion itself, seems to be veiled by our experience. What many teachers will say is if we learn to dwell and pay attention to the radiant presence of patience and generosity, and compassion, our experience doesn't veil that radiant presence, but our experience begins to shine with it. In other words, our experience becomes transparent to our true nature. We sort of see through the thoughts and concepts of our experience, of our painful experience, or even our joyful experience. We see through the separateness of it. And even painful feelings can shine with that radiant presence of our true nature. Many teachers talk about how when we go deeply, we look deeply and we experience the heart of our experience, that aliveness that we bring to each moment, which Kwang Roshi says is the essence of Zen. It's the heart of Zen. And there's that still point there in the heart of every experience that is our true nature. And when we experience that, our experience shines with our true nature, and we see that pain and pleasure, they come from the same root. They shine with the same light. And so that's what they mean. And then in the last part of the chapter, he's talking about patience with the non-arising of phenomena, or how they're marked with emptiness. That's kind of the equanimity, or the non-discriminatory aspect of the wisdom. That's the wisdom aspect of it, but seeing that pain and pleasure arise from the same root. And the other translation of the Heart Sutra that we chant, I think, is this: not that they're marked by emptiness, but that they're expressions of emptiness, which is kind of the same thing. But to me, that's more direct and more intimate, that to see how our true nature is not perceivable or describable. And that's what emptiness means. It's absence of trying to cling to thoughts about it, trying to say who or what we are. And, I had the experience of giving a talk to another group. And one woman said afterwards, "I really wish I could grasp what you're talking about." And I'm kind of like, well, I do too. I wish I could grasp what I'm talking about. I'm not grasping it. I'm just, it's just coming out. And it's not graspable. We can't grasp it. So if it's, have compassion for your frustration at not being able to grasp it, but it's not graspable. It's livable though. If we just live with it and pay attention to the presence that we are. One teacher will say, it's not difficult. Just remember that you are, not who or what we are, because that's the mystery, and we can't describe or perceive what we are, but we know that we are, and we are all the time, and we are the shared being of the compassionate Buddhas. So thank you.
Thank you, Shiken. I invite people in the Zendo or on the Zundo, if you would like to ask questions or offer your own thoughts, to please bow in and unmute yourself.
I just want to thank you, Roger, for your talk. I mean, there are so many points that resonated with me that I couldn't take up all your time to go over them. But your message about freedom from confines of the physical body, and not being able to grasp it, just be it. And it actually, in listening to you tonight, I thought about an event in my own life, and I thought about it in different terms because it happened at a time before I was introduced to Zen and the Buddhist way of thinking. But several years ago, I was very ill. I had been in the hospital for about 3 weeks. I was on TPN, and the various organs in my body were failing. It would be the lungs one day, the heart one day, and on and on. And finally, they came to me and they said, if you don't start getting better, you're going to be dead in at max 3 weeks. And that night, I meditated, prayed about it, and the next morning when they came to do rounds, I said, and I think the important thing was that I came to a place of peace with it. And the next morning when they came around, I said, I want you to take everything out of me. I mean, I was hooked up to so many things, and I was getting so many different medications being pumped into me. And they asked me, my treating physician, to speak to me, and we had a conversation, and he said, well, you're being reasonable, but you're so dehydrated, just keep the saline in. I'll support you as long as you agree to keep the saline in. And I said, okay. And they came and they took everything out. And in 3 days, I was leaving the hospital. It turned out that they were giving me so much medication that that was what was overwhelming me and causing my body to shut down. But I've experienced it in several different ways. But listening to you tonight, it came to me that what was happening without my even knowing it was that degree of patience, was that degree of acceptance, was that degree of just being at one with the flow of the universe. And and I see that now as a way to process that event. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, Carl, for sharing that deep experience you had. It sounds like maybe intuitively you kind of, from that peace and acceptance, you were able to allow your intuition to be deeper than the doctors. You know, if they didn't know they were overloading you with medications. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you.
How are you? That was a beautiful talk. And Carl, that was really beautiful too for sharing. I have a question for you and for Shikan, I guess, but for anyone else. So when you're facing something that could be like, there could be a big amount of fear there. Like when you heard the doctor say that, did you feel, I guess my question is, when you face fear that's that big in the moment, what does it feel like that it transforms into the peace?
I think I'll let Carl answer that first. Need to unmute.
Somehow in that moment, rather than falling apart, I became bigger than the situation. I felt, and there was a point that Roger made when you're giving your talk that actually spoke to that. I can't remember exactly how you said it. No, I wish I did. But it is the sense that, you know, your true self is the universe. It's larger than. And suddenly what was happening was within that space, not bigger than that space. And I just felt that and literally what went through my head was that if I've got to keep, because I was really in a lot of pain, and I just thought, if I'm going to keep going like this and die in 3 weeks, I might as well just die now.
Yeah.
And, you know, I decided I was prepared to go right now if that was where life wanted to take me, rather than continue with the suffering that I had been experiencing for another 3 weeks. So let's just take everything out and let life take its course. And it you know, in that moment, there was no panic to it. It was I remember I was in a room where I was looking across at another building, and I'd been looking across at the red bricks of this other building for 3 weeks, and I had pulled myself it was in the middle of the night, around 2 o'clock in the morning, and I just dragged everything and sat in an area where they had for visitors, but where I could see out, and it overlooked a highway, and there were trees and parks and a lake and the whole bit. And I felt connected in that space, and in that space, I just decided that I could come to a cogent decision without any sense of panic, and I felt all of that just felt like it left me, and it was like an outer body experience, and I just reached in that space. I did not feel the fear anymore, and I just kind of made the decision to go with whatever was going to happen to me, and and that was it.
Sounds like you realized you couldn't control it. There wasn't,
Right.
yeah. And so just offer it. And I guess what I would do, or what I do when I feel fearful, sometimes, obviously Carl was in a position where there wasn't anything you could really do about it. But sometimes there's something you can do about it. But along with that, I just offer the experience, offer it, let it go, be generous with it. And then, in an earlier chapter, he says that bodhisattvas don't lose anything because they're always giving everything away. They give everything away, and so they have no fear. When you have nothing to lose, what's there to fear? Kind of thing. So I try to make most of the time when I'm fearful, I'm irrationally fearful. There's not really anything really to be afraid of, but just offer it to the Buddhas, offer it to the universe, and give it away. And then, giving all of our experience away, it's easier to give away the difficult stuff, knowing you can't really control it.
I have heard Eckhart Tolle as, when you're completely focused, that it's the full presence, and when you are fully present, you are fully connected with the universe. You're fully connected with the greater part of you. That life that's unbound by the limitations of your physical body.
Yeah. Yeah, that bigger part, like you were saying, you were in a bigger space. That's not contained in the body. It's outside. It's not disembodied, but it's not contained in the body. It's not limited to the body. It doesn't share the limits of the body, physical body. Yeah. So you're not disembodied, you just are. Yeah.
We are coming to the end of our time this evening. Would anyone else like to offer any thoughts? And maybe one or two of you could mute yourself.
Just have one thing to say, Roger. You're going to be a hard act to follow next week.
Thanks for saving me in the car.
Oh, gosh. Well, on Saturday, okay, I'm in the wrong month. On Saturday, we're back to Anshin, chapter 52, Life is Meditation. So that will be a nice follow-up to today's talk. And then next week, pages 61 to 64 in the Anderson book. So let's close with our 4 vows. And thank you, everyone, for all the gift of your presence.
Nevertheless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to create it. Enlightened ways unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. Enlightened ways unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. Enlightened ways unsurpassable. I vow